your host, Alicia Morales, and welcome back to a new episode of In Her Details, a podcast focusing on revitalizing the family cell, culture, values, and bringing back tradition to our homes. Today, we have another special guest, a digital creator with a life transforming testimony that I am sure it will resonate to many of us. We can all relate at some point of our life and on how God is working in our lives and in our guests' lives, and also very motivating. Welcome, Stefano. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here and to share. And yeah, thank you for the invitation.
This is awesome to have you here, because especially that we are in the fourth week of Lent. How's your Lent going?
Good, really good. Yes, it's definitely been a fruitful Lent so far.
Praise God. Yes.
Praise God.
I think this is a time in our a season, right, of detachment, of prayer, of fasting, almsgiving. We know that, and but it also is a time where we experience also the that challenge of letting go of discouragements, of battles in our spiritual life or in general in our life. Um, I was watching a video that you have on your YouTube channel, Stefano, on discouragement. Can you tell us maybe even your testimony to start off of your encounter with God?
Yeah, so yeah, it'll tie into that video. I'll make the connection there and kind of what the context was for that video that you're referencing. But yeah, so to give a little background, and I'll just kind of give a quick overview, and then happy to dive deeper into whatever parts you may want to, wherever you want to take this. But to kind of paint the picture here, so I'm a first generation American. My parents are immigrants from Guatemala, and so I grew up in, like most Hispanic families, a pretty devout Catholic family. Um, and my parents were, I will say, I think a lot of Hispanic families can be more just like culturally Catholic, but my parents were actually like pretty devout in their faith, especially my mom. And so I grew up, going to church every Sunday and did all the, sacraments, received all my, first communion, confirmation, um, and then baptism, obviously. And like many young people, though, basically where I fell away from the faith was after I left home, graduated high school, and went off to university. And at that point, when I went off to college, that was pretty much when I um, felt like I was basically free and free to do as I pleased. And so, I kind of felt like I had done all the things in my life up until that point. Pretty much it was all like for my parents, right? So I, again, was checking off all the boxes. I was a really good student in school. Again, I was like the good Catholic boy in kind of like every way, like on the outside looking in. But I was always struggling internally with the faith growing up. And so by the time, again, I was in high school, and I think really, the education system, as we're seeing more and more, especially today, especially in like the public education system, and even in some, unfortunately, some private Christian or Catholic schools, there's just there's a major culture war and spiritual battle happening, right? So I think at that point, I was already starting to really question my faith, and not, having the answers to these difficult questions led me to, adopt the mindset that religion and Christianity was for weak people, for naive people, for, people who weren't intelligent. And so, again, by the time I went off to college, I pretty much had decided to completely disconnect from the church and, stopped going to mass, and just really started to, the goal was to just, live the full college experience. And so I did that, and I, continued to study hard, but I also started to party really hard, and, experimenting with drugs and alcohol and women, and just everything. And so that began what I would describe as like my era of rebellion. So pretty much the entirety of my 20s was just about, again, like pretty much rebelling against everything that I was taught to believe, and my questioning my morality and what's right and what's wrong, and all of that. And so where my story starts to get more interesting is a couple years after I graduated so I graduated in 2015, and then in 2017 I started to get really deeply involved in New Age spirituality.
Mhm.
And so that's basically where, from that point on, is when things started to really took me down a darker path. Um, and so for those who might not be familiar with New Age, it's a pretty common term these days. It's become so popular and um, common throughout our culture. But it is a very difficult to define like what New Age is, because it's not like a formalized religion or organization or anything like that. But just to kind of give an idea, typically people who are in the New Age space, number one, they don't really identify as being like a New Ager. Like I'd never identified as being a New Ager at the time, but they'll use terms like I often did of saying that you're spiritual but not religious, or believing that all paths lead to God. And it's really about this alternative spirituality that places yourself. It's very much about self empowerment, and so it's also very so I started out really deep in like self-help, and then that's kind of what led me into, I would say self-help is almost like can be like a gateway drug into New Age spirituality. And so it's about like ascending, transcending your smaller self, becoming your higher self. It's about self-realization. It's about they talk a lot about divinity, non-duality. And so it is definitely, to preface this as well, and to I always want to speak about these things with sensitivity and with discernment, because to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do think it's very dangerous. A lot of these New Age beliefs and practices are very dangerous, and ultimately, from my own personal experience, led me to a very dark place. And thanks be to God, I was saved out of that darkness. But I do think there is a very genuine search for truth, search for God, search for meaning, search for purpose in people who are dabbling in those spaces. I know that was the case for me. So again, I think in college I'd kind of become almost like agnostic, just kind of was like trying to have a good time, like live my best life. After college, I think that desire, that longing that we all have in our hearts for God kind of, came back to the surface. And then, no longer believing that Christianity was the path to pursue God, I found this New Age spirituality. And so at that point, I had also like left behind my corporate career, and I had started an online life coaching business. And so I became this like new age spiritual life coach type of person. And yeah, I was just like investing, thousands and tens of thousands of dollars in all these different new age retreats and workshops, and learning these things, applying them to my own life, law of attraction, manifestation, those types of things, and sharing those with my students and my clients as well. And yeah, there's a lot to say with all of that, but I'll just kind of start to bring it back to sort of my conversion or my reversion. So basically, ultimately, what led to my reversion was in 2022. Um, in 2021, I got into a relationship with a woman who I had met at one of these kind of like new age parties, and it was at like this Hollywood mansion. I was living in LA at the time, and like quickly, like we kind of like fell in love super quickly. She was actually living in Oregon at the time, so I ended up leaving LA to move to Oregon to be with her. And basically, what happened was um, it was a very dysfunctional and toxic relationship, and it basically took me being completely broken in that relationship, to come to the end of myself and to realize that this was just so dysfunctional, so dark. I felt like I was literally being like confronted with the devil, like constantly in this relationship. And and we both were in agreement at the time that this was something demonic was going on. There was this, definitely something, some sort of spiritual warfare happening. And this was a dilemma for me at the time, because again, in the new age, you don't believe in sin, you don't believe in evil. And yet here I was, right, being confronted with what was like clearly something demonic. And so um, it was in facing that darkness, the most intense darkness of my life, on a near constant basis for a little over a year, that I finally broke, right? And I just came to the end of myself. And my only saving grace was to cry out to the Lord, to cry out to Jesus. After all these years of, thankfully, there's a few things I think that really, um, don't know if I would be here otherwise. One of them being having so many people, namely, excuse me, my family and my mom constantly praying for me all these years, that I had strayed so far from God. Um, but also I think I never like had fully like rejected Jesus Christ. I had kind of bought into the new age idea of Jesus as this sort of like just another prophet or like another enlightened master. But at that time, for whatever reason, that was my instinct, was to cry out to Jesus, knowing that like he was the only person who could defeat this darkness, who could save me out of this situation. And thanks be to God, we both did survive, and our relationship ended. But yeah, I honestly don't know if either of us would have made it out of that if it hadn't been for Jesus Christ. So yeah, so obviously that was a very profound and yet very, difficult time, just because it completely flipped my whole worldview upside down. And at that point, I um, it didn't happen necessarily overnight, but it did happen pretty quickly over the next like few weeks and few months. I started, I was just praying to God, like, God, like, please open my eyes, like, show me like what I need to see and learn from all of this. And it just became very clear that a lot of these, again, like new age practices and things I was doing a lot of psychedelics and stuff like that as well at the time. It just became very clear to me that these things were not of God, and that they had, again, brought me to this very dark place. And so I completely renounced all of that, gave my life fully to Jesus Christ. And it's just been a process, since then, of, again, I do feel like initially there was like there was just so much grace, in that moment of repenting, and just so much
Mhm.
deep sorrow for all the sins I had committed and ways I'd turned against God. But then receiving that mercy, that infinite love and mercy that God has for each and every one of us. Um, so I do feel like there was, I was like instantly like made a new creation, and a lot of these things, again, that I had been pretty much like addicted to for years and years, I had like zero desire for it, right? Like the desires of my heart changed, and yeah, just completely turned my life around. I moved back home, and yeah, it's been a process since then. It hasn't been all easy, um but I do have this peace and this purpose and this joy, right? That we all are searching for, that I know that I was searching for my entire life. And it's like,
Mm,
St. Augustine has a quote, which says that, the greatest achievement in life is to find God. And so,
mm,
while in many ways I feel like I've wasted so many years, and this kind of ties into the video I think you're referencing.
mhm,
And so it's been this journey for me of, trying to rebuild my life now on this firm foundation, on the rock of Jesus Christ. And again, it's still, of course, like there's daily crosses, and there's moments of feeling discouraged and feeling like I've just, messed up my life too bad, and I went too far. But again, the truth is that, again, Jesus Christ is, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, King of the universe, God of the universe. And so he has the power to redeem all of us, and he has redeemed all of us, right, through his sacrifice on the cross. And so it's just a daily reminder of that. And that's kind of what I was talking about in that video, that I just shared on my YouTube channel recently, which was about
mhm,
recognizing, it's kind of like a second level of humility that I'm currently learning, where the first, was of course just being humbled by being so broken and brought to the end of myself and brought to my knees, and realizing that I couldn't save myself and I couldn't fix the situation. I needed Jesus. So that was kind of the first level of, just being completely humbled. But then I caught myself more recently, and now that we're in Lent, reflecting on everything and recognizing myself falling into these episodes of discouragement and
Mhm.
despair, and realizing that that's also an issue of pride, because again, it's our own pride that and our reliance on ourselves that causes us to feel discouraged when we look back on our failures and we look at our mistakes and we think that we're so much greater than our actual weaknesses are. And so yeah, it's been very humbling for me to just continue to uh, you know ask the Lord to show me the truth and to be willing um, to not fall into discouragement, because as I talked about in the video, humility, I think the title of the video was the antidote to discouragement, and it was actually like a spoken word poem that came through, which I shared in the video
Mhm.
if you saw. And so um, basically I was saying the antidote to discouragement is not encouragement, it's humility, because humility, like I'm saying, on the one hand, it helps you see yourself in all of your faults and your weaknesses, and recognizing that we're all like that, right? We're all weak and we're all broken and we're all this is part of our fallen nature. But again, thanks be to God, through the grace of God, we can overcome our weaknesses, we can work through our faults, and live in a more virtuous and harmonious way with the way that God's designed us to live. But also at the same time, it doesn't um, so the humility piece, the last thing I'll say here is just that the humility piece doesn't inflate us, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
inflate our ego, which I think sometimes, again, in my experience, at least for sure, coming from the new age, like self-help, self-empowerment, it kind of is this like superficial, like affirmations and like
Mhm.
building yourself up in the mirror and saying all these like positive things about yourself. But for me, again, that really I've recognized has like had the effect of inflating my ego, making myself think that I'm better than I actually am. So I'm saying humility obviously doesn't do that, but it also doesn't make you see yourself as less than you are. It just lets you see yourself as you truly are. And so that's yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about in that video.
Wow. It's a very powerful video, so that's why, and your testimony, it's simply just so powerful when you were, sharing your testimony right now. I was able to just see, like, you going through this, surrounded, like, by the tornado, a hurricane of this new age, of this darkness, but God was always there ready for you, whenever you were ready to let go and let him do what he had to do. He's there waiting and rescuing you. And sometimes I mean, it's like the question is, so I have to go through this in order to find God? No. God has given us our conscience and our intelligence to know what's right and what's wrong, and what to say yes and what to say no. He is the potter, right? And we are the clay, so he's constantly working on us. um and I think the question for that brings together with your testimony, and overcoming this discouragement in general in our lives: can we start over?
Mm.
Shall we start over? Repentance, right? And of course, because God is always there waiting, sometimes we have to, like they say, hit bottom in order to surrender completely to Him. Yes. Wow. It's very, very, very powerful.
Yes.
Stefano.
Yeah, no, I
Yes.
totally agree. I think to your question earlier, I don't know, it was maybe a rhetorical question, but I did feel compelled to say something in response, as far as um, do you have to go through that in order to find
Mhm.
God? Obviously, in my case, it seems to be that was what I had to go through, but obviously, I don't think that everybody has to
Mhm.
go through that. Um, I think what it comes down to, from as far as I can, from my limited perspective, is that I think the more prideful you are, the more you have to kind of go through
Mhm.
those types of
Phases.
intense
Mhm.
yeah, trials of darkness in order to again kind of come to the end of yourself and realize that, you know, you
Mhm.
can't do everything yourself. So I think that's again for me why, um, yeah, just been a very humbling experience, and there is a freedom in, and it's, yeah, it's still a work in progress for sure, but in relinquishing that control, right, and saying like I can't do this on my own, and because I think that's kind of the reframe again from a lot of, from the perspective of people in like self-help and self-empowerment, and even, right, the way that I used to view religious people before, or Christians, is that like, oh, they're just weak and so they can't do it on their own, and so they, it's almost like a crutch. I used to view it as like, oh, they need a crutch to try to get through life. But it's actually, and so that's one way to look at it, but on the other hand, the way I see it now, it's like it's actually just such a, there's just so much freedom and liberation actually
Mhm.
in realizing that again you're not in control, which obviously is just the truth. It's not even, it's not like it's a made up idea. It's just, it's made up idea that you are the one who's in control of everything and you're
Mhm.
the absolute creator of everything. Like that's obviously not the truth. Like,
Mhm.
we're in control of so little. There is things we can control and we have control over, and we should, do our best to um, change what we can and improve ourselves. But there's, the vast majority of life is out of our control, and so I think
Mhm.
again learning to surrender to God's plans and God's will, is really, yeah, there's a lot of peace in that, and not needing to constantly be trying to control everything.
Exactly, and when we have Christ as the core of our lives, then it is possible because exactly like you said, without God, we can't. The only way is, well, inviting him and allowing his will to be done in our lives, because if he's not the center of us, it won't work. I mean, that's where we fall into, temptations and, these discouragements, these battles, because we're not inviting him into our lives, and we have the example of the saints. I mean, thankfully, in our faith, in our, Catholic faith, we have the saints, and they have their stories that we can, you know, um, their stories resonate with our lives or had it worse, right? But they always, well, always were, in constant communication with God and the Eucharist. Yes,
Mhm. Amen.
this love for the Eucharist. Um, Stefano, now can you share, now as a digital creator, your way of sharing your, well, what is your intention, also with, reaching out to community, to, um, those on social media, for example?
Mhm. Yeah, so basically, to give a little bit of context, as I was explaining or mentioned
Mhm,
earlier, I was running this like online life coaching business for a few years, and so, um, I was doing a lot of, I was already starting to do a lot of kind of like social media marketing. Like that was pretty much how I was running my business, at the time. And so once I had my reversion, um, I kind of took a step back from everything. I was actually working for Tony Robbins, at the time,
mm,
and so I resigned from that job and was, took a few months just kind of like, one, just trying to like again get back on my feet and just healing and just spending a lot of time in prayer, like asking the Lord, you know, what He wanted me to do, like where He wanted to lead me, and how, how I could, use the gifts that He's given me and the experiences that I've had, for His glory, right? So like that,
mhm,
that's kind of been my sole focus, since then, is just, how do I, utilize the gifts He's given me, the talents He's given me, and the experiences I've had, um, to bring Him greater glory, to share the gospel of Christ,
mm,
and to just try to bring others to Christ. And so, um, I've always had the intention to help others, and so that's always remained the same. Obviously, I was very, misled and lost for many years, but that intention's always remained the same. It's just solution now has
Mhm.
changed dramatically. And of course, the solution being Jesus Christ, right? Like Jesus Christ, I made another video where I talked about this, like, is the greatest self-help hack of all time. If you truly want to be the best version of yourself, right, then you
Mhm.
need to be, the only way you can truly be the best version of yourself is to be the version of yourself that God truly made you to be, right? To surrender your will to his will. And so so that's pretty much the intention. So I was praying about it, and basically, yeah, I was kind of like, okay, well, number one, like, I feel like I have to, like I said, I like had to renounce all of my new age teachings, and especially because I had been like so public, like online. I didn't have like a huge following, but I had a small online following. And um so I felt a duty to like let them all know that I, renounce these things now. Like, I apologize for anybody that I may have misled, especially to like the clients and people I had worked with personally. And so that was like a very clear, like, I was very convicted that I had to do that. So I made like a long Facebook post. That was kind of the first thing I shared after I had taken like a few months, just kind of like recollecting myself.
Mhm.
Um, and that got, um, as I had imagined, got a pretty uh, mixed bag of responses from people. I'll put it that way. But it really did. I was really happy actually overall with the responses, even though there was definitely, as you can imagine, I'm sharing for years and years like all these, blasphemous like new age teachings, and then like one
Mhm.
day I come and like say I renounce all of this and I'm Christian. And so a lot of people were kind of, you know um, not understanding that. But there was a lot of people that it opened up a lot of really beautiful conversations. And yeah, I've been um, really enjoying, as I've continued now since then, sharing, as I'm going along my own, again, just faith journey, and continuing to share the things I'm learning, and um, and just continuing to share my testimony. Yeah, I just really enjoy the dialogue that happens there as
Mhm.
well. I know it's very difficult online to sometimes have like, yeah, more nuanced conversations, and especially because I am also trying to um, sort of reach people who might be still like in those seeking phases, as I once was. It's been very difficult trying to figure out like how to best do that. And at the same time, so it's kind of like a twofold intention, I would guess I would say, and I'm still figuring it out as I go. But one is like trying to reach those people, and again, sharing my testimony and what I've learned, hope in the hopes that obviously through God's grace that something might, Holy Spirit might move them and touch them.
Mhm.
But also at the same time, speaking to Catholics and Christians, and more as sort of like a warning or a caution, right, of these types of New Age beliefs and practices, because they are so widespread now. And I think a lot of Christians and Catholics are not even aware really of what it is, especially again because it can come in so many different like forms and shapes, but it all kind of has this underlying ideology that, again, a lot of these beliefs are um, conflicting and contradictory to Christianity. And so I think it's really important to just kind of try to help raise awareness around that. And, as I'm learning again as well, just how to be more discerning and cautious against those things.
Yeah, and it's because, well, all this new age and different things on just on social media, how crazy and insane it wraps, the audience or
Hmm.
those viewing, or just you go
Sure.
from one video and then it goes to another. So definitely, I mean, it's um like this little, well, no, it's like a battle from, Christianity and New Age, and then it wraps
Yeah.
you, and they make it also in a way where, yeah, it attracts. It attracts. They make, the message is so catchy, and especially to our future generations, or the generations, the teens, the youth, it just it absorbs them completely, and
Yeah.
that's why there's so much also brokenness in the world, and that's the audience that we have to reach out to. So
Absolutely.
absolutely, and that's why I asked this question, because I see a pros and cons about social media, and definitely there is There is the positive side of it, and then there's also the, well, okay, maybe it's not a good idea, but definitely if that's a way that we have to reach out to this brokenness, this those who need to hear these testimonies, this is the way. This is a digital way to get out to the community and to society and to take more souls to heaven.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think this is why I was really struggling, or not struggling, but just really spent a good amount of time discerning whether or not I wanted to kind of come back on social media. And,
Mhm.
and now it was either I was either going to like just completely be off social media, and I still sometimes um, kind of dream about that. I would say because yeah, there are definitely a lot of, obviously, and it's becoming more and more aware now to everybody, like
Mhm.
um, the 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 negative impacts that social media can have on our mental health and all these different things. But so I was either going to just be off it forever, or I was going to come back, which is obviously what I ended up doing. But now, basically giving my social media platforms to the Lord. And so it's like, okay, Lord, use me, use these platforms
Mm,
how I can to share my testimony, to bring you glory. And yeah, I do think it is really important. And I think it is important that we also have, boundaries, and we, are intentional and deliberate with how we use these platforms. Um, but I think because, like you're saying, there is so much of, you know, um, this stuff on social media that's not rooted in truth,
mhm,
that's really leading people further away from God. um yeah, just like anywhere else you go, spiritual warfare is happening, and like you were saying. And so I think as Christians, those who feel called to and have a story or something of value to share, I think it is important that we do also enter those spaces, and try to also bring, meet people where they're at there as well.
mhm. Yes. Also, um, what I also see a lot right now, that's like, well, it isn't a trend. It's the darkness, right? Like the evil eye, or many young adults looking at all the superstitious. Um, I guess they're relying on that, right? Instead of relying on God, instead of trusting God, it's relying on these, yeah, these, well, new age, of course, these spirituality in quotes,
Yeah.
um, things, yoga, and instead of seeking God, seeking His Word, um, can you share with us a little bit of that? Well, your thoughts.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's ultimately this. Well, I think there's two things that come to mind at least. One is, like I was saying earlier, kind of this desire to control. And so a
Mhm,
lot of New Age, which is connected to like the occult and sorcery and magic and
mhm,
these types of things, um, are really a desire to have control, to be able to control reality, to manipulate reality, to see the future, to talk to the dead, right? All these types of things, um, which are also important to note for Christians, are all things that are explicitly um, talked about in the Bible, in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy, as abominations to God, right? Doing these things, it's listed the same with like fornication and adultery and sorcery, divination, consulting the dead. These are all abominations to God, and people who practice these things will not inherit the kingdom of God. And so it is very clear, like boundaries that we're not supposed to cross. And and so yeah, I think that's one thing, is just it's that desire to control and not trusting in God. Um and so that's the first piece. The second piece, I think, is again, that longing for the supernatural, the longing for the mystical. I think there's a natural fascination in us for that, because again, we have this heart in our hearts for God. And so the new age is spiritual, right? It's an alternative spirituality. Again, it's not a formalized religion or whatever, but they're all, it's often just a giant it's like an umbrella term for all these different like Eastern religions and philosophies, and you just kind of cherry pick and choose, and it's been very westernized and commercialized, and um, but again, it has these elements of spirituality and the supernatural. Something I've come to learn since my reversion is that just because something is um, supernatural doesn't mean it's good. And again, obviously in those spaces it is conveyed in a way that like you believe that this is all of God and you're tapping into God frequency and God's vibrations and all these types of things. Um, but again, these things are clearly condemned and restricted in the Bible. So obviously it's not of God. And there's a reason why God restricts things, never to, to control us, but to protect us. And so there's a difference. I learned this term from a friend, a Catholic friend. He was telling me, I had never heard this before. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called preternatural. So preternatural is something that's supernatural, that's not of God. Or actually, I might be mixing that up now. I'm not sure. I might be mixing it up. But basically, there's the supernatural in the supernatural realm, right? Not all spirits are good, right? Obviously, the devil was an angel who fell and is now a fallen angel, and so basically, a lot of these spirits and spirit guides and things you're tapping into in the New Age, they are doors to the demonic realm. So it is
Mhm.
spiritual, but the devil's a spirit too, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that's where yeah, it gets very, very dangerous, and
If
it
he knew that
ultimately,
God is God.
what's that?
If he knows that God is God, the devil.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and no, and nobody ever taught me. I feel like this is something that actually, yeah, it's like such a basic thing, and maybe I did learn it, but it didn't really, I didn't really process it. Um, is that, Satan can masquerade as an angel of light, and so again,
Mhm.
all of this New Age stuff, which is disguised in the language of love and light, again, is actually, it's very deceptive because it is darkness disguised as light, and it's leading you further away from God and not closer to God.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes we seek the or, in our lives, before our transformation, we seek these things, because we want to fit in, or, because a friend, told us about it, that it worked for them, or I don't know, it's just a makeup
Right.
story, right? We fall into these, or, if those going through a problem in their marriage, and they, "Hey, you should, go have your," fall into new age, or yoga, it'll help you relax, or and we fall into
Yeah.
these things. Um, but no, just do yourself a favor and be yourself and rely on God, right? Sometimes we want to change or be like someone else too.
Mm,
Be a different a copy of that other person. And we should do ourselves a favor and just be ourselves, because if not, God would have made copy paste of each one of us.
right.
Um, And instead of relying on these superstitions, I mean, especially in our Latin American, uh, countries, we hear a lot about this, or about superstitions. In the summer, I was in Mexico, and this, it reminds me right now. And outside one of the churches, they have the little puestos, the little markets, right? And they had a bunch of the Saint Benedict bracelets, the red little bracelets with the evil eye. And if we're not informed of the significance of these superstitious, and dark, um, now again, trends, right, that are out there, if we're not informed of the meaning, of them truly, we fall into these, um, beliefs, but and instead of seeking God, and again, it's just how can we doubt him, right? If not, how are we here? Who gave us this life? Who died for us? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I do think like you were saying, um, it's just, yeah, it's such an appealing thing, again, for many of the reasons
Mhm,
we've already discussed, trying to fit in, like you were saying, or seeing other people that maybe there's something about that person that is inspirational or admirable, and they're promoting these types of things, which again is very, very common today. Again, it's so like mainstream now, is really, it went from basically a lot of this new age stuff.
mhm,
um, the history is pretty interesting if you trace it back, and this was actually also very eye-opening to me when I wrote that first like Facebook post. um, I came across some videos that were kind of exposing the darkness of New Age and connecting it to some of the people who first kind of brought these New Age ideas to the West in like the early 1900s. And they were like explicit Satanists. And so, again, now most people in New Age, like, I think most vast majority, 99%, are well intentioned and don't mean any harm. Like I definitely didn't, and I was just trying to help people, help myself, and help others. um, but it has very dark roots, right? And that's another thing that's been very eye-opening to me, is to see, like, if you want to understand something, you have to trace it to its roots. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of different reasons that people can be attracted to it. But again, ultimately, I think something to just like think about is that, um, again, things that the thing is that, like, new age, it has a lot of these like partial truths,
mhm,
which is why it's so deceptive, right? Anything that's deceptive or deception, it will give you like breadcrumbs of truth, so you recognize the truth there. And again, that's where there's aspects of it that are true, but it's out of context, it's missing the full picture, it's disordered. And so that's what makes it false, and
mhm,
leads you into your own uh, belief. Ultimately, the underlying belief in all of this, again, there's a few different kind of main beliefs, and again, everybody will use kind of different language, and but ultimately, it's all the underlying ideology is to believe that you are God, and that we are all gods, and so there's no separation between God and you. And that's again where it gets super, you know, on the one hand, it's very appealing. It can be very appealing from just like a self-empowerment perspective of like, oh wow, yeah, yeah, you can create anything, you can achieve anything, you can do anything. So again, that's like the very like, you know, self-help, self-empowerment type of language. But
mhm,
then again, the more you go into like the more spiritual side of it, like people are literally telling you like you are God, like, and
mhm,
they'll use that explicit language. um which honestly for me, I think was kind of more scary to hear that. But as I just went deeper and deeper into it, like I literally got like brainwashed into that belief system, I feel
mhm,
like. And so that is, I mean, I think to any like normal, rational person, like that is a very dangerous belief system to again believe that you are God, right? If we all believe that we're God, like that's a scary world to live in. And thanks be to God we're not, and that God is in control. But there
mhm,
are, yeah, that's ultimately where it leads you, is to have this God complex, which of course is really like that's what Satan is himself, right? He wanted to be God and rebelled against God. And so, um, yeah,
and
I
that's
think
what we're seeing
it's
in the world with everything that's happening with all the,
absolutely,
yeah, we're seeing it in our in the politics, we're seeing it everywhere where,
yeah,
man wants to play to be God and, do things that God already had control of, and we wanna manipulate those things,
yep,
and it's like they
exactly,
wanna do a part 2. I don't wanna put it like
yeah,
that, that's scary, but that's what they wanna do.
yeah,
And it's just and that's why, I think, like the readings today, Jesus reveals the link to Moses, right? And we need to inspire to learn the legacy of our spiritual history,
hmm,
of our faith,
yeah,
because if we don't go out there and pick up our staff like Moses, um, and crush the head of the devil like Mary did. That's why God puts us on earth and allowed us, our generation, to live during this generation, to go out there, to get out to the youth, to get out to the families, and not them be appealed by by these trends, by these
yeah.
demonic darkness that's going out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that to tie it to like the family, right? And obviously
Mhm,
we learn this, the more you study our faith and the Catholic tradition and teachings,
mhm,
like the family is the domestic church, right? And so of course, like to break down society, the devil's going to attack the family, and we see
mhm,
that happening in every possible way right now with, again, all these ideas of you can be whatever you want, whoever you want, even including changing your own sex and gender identity and all of this kind of stuff, is obviously leading to the complete breakdown of family. And without family, without fathers, we see all the just ripple effect that has in
mhm.
all these broken homes, and just all the chaos that's happening everywhere right now. So yeah, I think it's super important to be having these conversations, and like you're saying, just becoming more grounded and knowledgeable in our Catholic faith and the teachings, because
Mhm,
everything, this is what's been so refreshing and exciting for
mhm,
me, is like everything I was searching for outside of the church for all these years. um, I finally am finding now in the faith and realizing it's been here all along. But it
mhm,
is, unfortunately, I think that's what's difficult about it, is it can be overwhelming. Like there's so much there and there's so much information, and it's like it's a gift, and it's a huge gift and a huge blessing, because we have the saints, and we have scripture, and we have the magisterium. So there's just so much there. But that's where I think us as like laity and lay people have a calling right now to be more folk, to one, study and learn more ourselves, but then to go out and share that in these different mediums, on social media or in person, however we're called to do it, because otherwise people just don't know. And I think that's where, um, yeah, I think it's just really important that we learn how to effectively, share the gospel and share the truth, because everybody is searching for that.
absolutely. Well, Stefano, I want to thank you so much for joining us today at this powerful testimony and what you have shared with us. I know many will be touched by, and yeah, like I said, it will reflect on their lives and their testimonies as well, and it will inspire many. How can we find you? Oh, one more thing that I just remembered on your Instagram. There is a post, of where you're showing, uh, your before and your after, when new age, and now your transformation when finding Jesus, right? From new age to Jesus, and that's on your Instagram, bio as well. So definitely, I think that's something to check out, right? Can you, maybe share an invitation to your, profile as well?
Yeah, thank you for having me again. And yeah, God be praised. He is a good and merciful God. And yeah, I hope that yeah, these conversations just keep happening, and we continue to encourage each other, and be there for each other, and just seek the Lord in all things. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Those are like the main three social media platforms I'm on. On Instagram, it's just my name, Stefano Gandini, and YouTube is the Great Ganddini. And yeah, I have my full testimony video on YouTube, if anybody wants to hear the full story. And yeah, I think that's it.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. You will find all those links as well, at the bottom of our YouTube video on this episode. And definitely we'll be sharing these links on our Instagram account as well. Once again, thank you so much. And please, to all our listeners, please continue to join us every, well, now we have switched the date to Tuesday nights at 9:30 p.m. We will be praying the rosary in Latin. We went from Saturday morning at 6:30 a.m., but now we changed it to Tuesday nights at 9:30 p.m. Instagram Live and Facebook Live as well. And please continue to also follow us on our Imago Dei Digital Ministry uh, Instagram profile, our YouTube channel, and we look forward to many more. episodes and to continue working. And we have actually March 22nd, we have the Calvary Project, which will be sharing more details, where we're going to be walking the streets of the city of Norwalk or the city of LA, where it's still in the last of our details. But next week, March 22nd, we will be walking the streets, the Calvary Project, the Passion of Christ. So thank you very much, and God bless you all. Until next time.